At this point, the wing is flirting with stall. So why does the bird go there on purpose? Because landing on a perch isn't about cruising efficiency, it's actually an energy dump over extreme conditions. The bird has to arrive there first, then at low speed, with the right altitude, and it has to do that all while the air over its wings are starting to separate and the bird begins to lose control. So the question isn't, how do birds land? It's actually, what are they optimizing and why is that so important for sacrificing their overall aerodynamics? This paper we're looking at today is testing one really specific hypothesis, and that is birds try to minimize how much of the landing path they spend deep in high angle attack territory, as we see here in this figure. The researchers tested this hypothesis and they built a morphing wing, as we can see here on the middle right. This is actually a drone which is mimicking a bird. And they wanted to see if that single hypothesis recreates the bird-like swoop and pitch up perching maneuver. And they documented their findings in this paper here, which is called Agile Perching Maneuvers in Birds and Morphing Wing Drones. It's open access and you'll find it in the link below. The DOI is at the top right of the page here. So what are the components to this maneuver? Well, in figure 3, if we scroll down here, figure 1 showed a little bit, but figure 3 shows it better. So in the top left of this image here, we see the general path birds take when landing on a perch. To begin with, a bird will start level and flying along. It won't then just land on the perch though, and that makes sense. If they're flying level, that then means that they're still traveling quite fast enough to produce enough lift to outweigh their regular weight. So coming to a sudden stop from that on a very small spot is difficult and would probably even injure the bird sometimes. So they execute this following maneuver. They'd first dive down, and this is a little odd when you think about it because if they were traveling too fast when they were at a level flight, when they dive down, they'll then accelerate and go even faster. That's because some of the potential energy they had turns into kinetic energy and hence speed. But then they start to climb back up to the perch and then finally land on it. So if we look at this figure, it shows that the bird's initial height is exactly the same as the final perching point. Now this is a schematic, so the bird doesn't necessarily need to start exactly at the same height as it will end at. It just is about the same height. And with all else equal, that would mean that the bird's speed just before grabbing onto the ledge will be about the same speed as when it started too. So if it's still quite fast, how will that help any? Well, the researchers here actually document what happens here. So during a bird's flight like this, in figure 5 we see here, that at the bottom part it starts from, and then throughout the final landing here. Here we can see how this maneuver can potentially benefit the bird. So when it's at its lowest point, it is more or less gliding along. Its angle of attack isn't too great, so its drag is fairly low. As such, it won't be decelerating too much at this point. But it then starts to climb up, and that changes things. You can see that it continually pitches itself to higher and higher angles of attack. By the end, it's around 45 to 60 degree angle of attack, maybe even more. That means its drag will skyrocket, and so its speed will drop in this phase now. That means that it can now land at a much slower speed than what it was to begin with and at the lowest point in its flight. And that makes it easier to time, as well as I'm sure easier on the bird, especially its joints, which I'm sure the older birds would be thankful for. So the idea of this maneuver is that it's landing at a much slower speed through this scrubbing off of speed. Now, if you want to do this kind of analysis yourself, so CFD workflows, setups, meshing, cases, my OpenFOAM course is linked below, and it's built for people who want to go from installing to actually running useful simulations. And actually, with the overset mesh, you can actually do this kind of simulation yourself here. So anyway, this clearly shows how the speed can be reduced with this bird landing with this maneuver. It uses the height it needs to climb as a way to flare its wings up and then to increase its drag and slow down. If it didn't have that climbing phase, flaring its wings up like that would be a little bit more difficult. But that maneuver, while it satisfies the speed problem, it creates another major problem, and that is control. So if you pitch up this high angle attack here, you're getting close to stall, if not stalling already. On top of that, in order for the bird to rotate like this, it needs to change the orientation of its tail and even its wings. That changes its balance. And as I've said before, getting in the air isn't the hard bit, staying in the air is the hard bit. That's where balance really comes into it. So pitching up like this really strains both the lift production and the control that the bird has over the flight. And that is what these researchers are looking into. Why does this bird do this? If it's so potentially dangerous, why does it pick this maneuver to land? Isn't it high risk? So to find out, they took a video of a Harris hawk landing here, as we see in this bottom part. Then, as we saw in figure 1 on page 2, they made a drone that approximates this bird. So the bird on the left is the Harris hawk, and then on the right is their drone. Its weight is about the same as the Harris's hawk, but it's slightly greater in surface area and wingspan. And to me, that makes quite a bit of sense because the drone will definitely not be as good at flying as the hawk. So you need to have a little more forgiveness in its design. Having a greater wingspan means that it will be more efficient, and having a greater wing area means that you'll generate more lift for about the same weight here. So the lift to weight ratio, is higher here, which makes it easier for this thing to get in the air and then potentially control it. So in figure 2, we get a better look of their drone. And I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I've seen this drone in other works. I think that this drone is the lab's general one and that they use this for different studies, but I can't quite remember the papers that I saw them in. Anyway, it has 8 degrees of freedom, which means that it can move different parts of itself in 8 different ways. The authors list them in the figure, with the most interesting ones to me being, first of all, the tail ones. So the tail can pitch up and down, as well as your left and right, but it can also spread out wider and also shrink in more. And that is a key feature that birds do too. So you can see that they really do that, these regular birds. So if you go outside and look at a common bird like a pigeon flying around, you'll see their tail changes depending on what they want to do during their flight. But one thing to point out is that this drone produces thrust very differently to a regular bird, including the Harris hawk here. Here on the bird's nose, there is a propeller. So in effect, it's a fixed wing plane. Here, I don't think this is too much of an issue though, because in this entire flight maneuver, we don't really rely on the wings to produce thrust. The Harris hawk won't be doing that either. It doesn't flap its wings during this maneuver. So the way these wings work for this drone should be more or less similar to a way the bird's wings work during this maneuver particularly. So I think it's okay, this setup. Now in these little blue plots, we can see the other ways that the bird can morph itself. I won't go through them too much, but if you would like to download this paper, you can then look at them in more detail if you want to. It's pretty cool, these different DOFs here. But one thing I found very interesting, which probably won't be interesting to too many people out there, but anyway, they said this bird drone is stabilized using a proportional derivative controller, not a PID one, but just a PD one. So they left out the integral part of the controller. What that means in real life is that it suggests that perhaps their initial setup and launching of the drone was and had very little error, or maybe any error that was there wasn't a concern for what they were finding, or maybe they sort of deemed that the integral part would make this control loop too laggy. Either way, they left that out, which is quite interesting. Anyway, to test whether their hypothesis is true, whether birds use this maneuver so that they can still land on precarious areas, but minimize the amount of time they spend at these unstable angles of attack, where they start to lose control, the authors made a test rig we see in figure 4 on page 5. So it's pretty cool. They literally strapped this thing onto this drone launcher, and this drone launcher is placed at the approximate lowest height in this landing maneuver, and then the drone flies upwards, and they have a protective net for the drone to fall into. Now the exact path the drone took was tweaked to match the Harris's hawk trajectory a little bit, not completely, but very close. So in figure 4b on the top right here, a graph shows the horizontal distance covered versus the altitude of the bird/drone. There are minor differences among them, but all are very close. And the interesting thing is actually what is plotted on the graph below. So what we see in figure 4c, the bottom right. So here we see a simulated drone, and then their actual drone, which they call the Lies Eagle or the Liz Eagle, and then the Harris Hawk. In this section, we see the amount of relative energy each has at the end of the maneuver. The most important thing that stands out to me is that most of the energy of the bird is dissipated, whether it's the simulation one, the Liz Eagle, or the Harris Hawk. For the real bird, the Harris Hawk, about 54% of the total energy has been dissipated by the end now. So that energy is mostly being stripped away by the drag, by pitching up so much, increasing the drag coefficient, and slowing down. Then the next major component is potential energy, making up about 32% of the energy. So overall, the energy it once had, 54% went into just being lost, then 32% went into potential energy. In other words, this bird has climbed up a lot now and has stored much of the kinetic energy it once had at that lowest point into the potential energy now. And finally, only 14% of the energy is actually comprised of kinetic energy now. That right here shows that by climbing up in this flight to the perch, the hypothesis that it does this to scrub off its speed is highly likely. And as a quick side note, if you like this kind of thinking, using aero as a control tool, not just to reduce drag, my automotive course breaks down downforce, drag balance, and why separation can help or hurt depending on your goals. Links in the description. Now, back to this. If we were to compare the real bird with the real world drone, the Liz Eagle, and then the simulated one, there are some differences in the exact amount of energy for each of these parts. But overall, the same general trend exists. Most of the energy is dissipated. And then generally, the potential energy increases and the kinetic energy is pretty low overall. Now, this was for the exact configuration tested. But what happens when you change things? Like, what happens if you change how much the wings are swept back during this maneuver? So I should point out that the wing sweep angles shown here, from what they appear, are swept backwards. This is very different to the Harris Hawk, where in figure 5, we saw that the bird actually pushes its wingtips forward when it comes into landing. So this bottom figure here. But still, this all shows how different wing and tail configurations affect the kinetic energy upon landing, as well as the distance required to perform this maneuver. So in this figure 3 here, we see a bunch of different information. And again, this is for mostly going through when the wings are being swept to different angles of attack, usually backwards, when the tail is being fanned out more. And also, they also, I think, looked into pitching the tail up and down. But anyway, in the bottom row of this figure on the left, we see a 3D map that shows the amount of kinetic energy of the bird for different combinations of tail sweep range, range of motion, and the wing sweep range of motion. So what this means is, how does the amount of kinetic energy the bird has change when you change the tail and wing sweep more or less? And it's a little hard to tell here. The figures are so small, but by the tail sweep, what the authors are referring to is how much the tail can be spread out. And by wing sweep, it tells us how much the wingtips are pulled backwards. Because remember, back in figure 2, where we saw the drone here, only the outer portions of the wings can be swept forwards or backwards. The inner part is fixed. So the conclusion in figure 3 is, as you might expect, a greater range of motion, so both the tail and wing can sweep more. That results in less final kinetic energy. So you can see as you come down this graph, which means that either the wing sweep range of motion increases or the tail sweep range of motion increases, or both, the kinetic energy that it has as a percent drops dramatically. In fact, when both the tail and wings can sweep 100% of their motion, the kinetic energy drops to close to 0%. So that means that the bird would almost be stationary now. It would just be like in the air stationary at this point. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about why a bird might not want to do that though. So we saw here that there are some configurations where the kinetic energy can be very close to 0%. And if this drone simulator can do that, then I'm pretty sure nature can do that too. So birds could probably do this if they wanted to. And if you have almost no kinetic energy, that means that it'd be easier for you to just step down onto the perch, like extend the leg and grab it. You literally have no deceleration really left to do. You're pretty much stationary. But that is not necessarily a good thing for a bird to be able to do. That's because this approach would only work if you had a good landing, so you're correct 100% of the time. If the bird misjudges the perch by even a few centimeters, this approach of having no velocity by the end wouldn't work, because when the bird comes to a stationary standstill, it's still in the air, but the perch isn't next to it, so it can't grab it. So by not having completely zero kinetic energy, there's still a little bit of a buffer that the bird can use to make final adjustments to correct potentially misjudgments to begin with. What's more, in the event that the bird can't reach the perch for some reason, it still has some kinetic energy, so some speed, to recover the flight. If it has no speed, so we have 0% kinetic energy, then it needs to work hard to generate lift and get back up to flying speed. That might not seem like such an issue for something like a hummingbird, which is incredibly agile, but for bigger birds that could be a major issue. For example, trying to get a condor to suddenly recover is a major task. So while this graph on the bottom left tells us that it would be possible to get pretty close to zero kinetic energy, in practice that probably isn't desirable because it would make it more risky for the bird. And that's why we probably see in figure 4 that the Harris's hawk doesn't come to a complete rest in the air when it's perching. It still has some kinetic energy. It has 14% now. Now, it does say 14%, but I'm pretty sure that there's a little bit of a deviation in it because it would probably depend on the perch and the flight conditions. So for example, in perhaps crosswinds, you'd want to have more of a bit faster to then cut through the air. So that might change a little bit, but for this particular case, it's 14%. And also, there might be a little bit of error in this data, so it might be between 13% and 16% or something like that. But it should change, but this is just a general trend, I'm pretty sure. Now back in figure 3, we also see how the tail sweep and wing sweep affect the distance required to land. So this is on the rightmost figure. And this adds a little more to the design space and considerations for the bird. So first of all, you look at it and it shows that, okay, the greater the range of motions for the tail and wing sweeps, the more distance is required for the landing maneuver. So the less distance. So if it can sweep more, it doesn't need as much distance to land. If it sweeps less, it needs more distance. But that is interesting to me because if you increase the range of motion, then the amount of kinetic energy preserved is lower, it's saying here. In other words, this bird is decelerating faster, it scrubs off more kinetic energy, but over a shorter distance too. So this region will also be pushing the bird to perform more acrobatically because you're pushing it closer to the limit of being out of control. You're decelerating more and quicker. You're reducing your speed quicker and you're getting to a lower end state. And if you're an RC builder, you understand that this is basically the stall edge world we live in, where CG, tail sizing, and control effectiveness, and making sure the airplane is predictable when it slows down, this is all coming into it as well, general flight. And I have a full RC airplane design and build course linked on my site if you want a structured path from concept to a stable flyer. But coming back to birds. This stall edge is another consideration for it, and perhaps why birds don't try to decelerate to stationary before touching down either. It would mean that there'd just be too much loading on them and pushing them too close to being out of control. If they want to preserve control, then going to this extreme angle is not going to help them do that. The rate of climb will be greater too, which means that their angle of attack will be higher, and that'll push them closer to stall as well. So overall, it seems like these researchers' hypothesis that birds use this maneuver to reduce the time they're close to being out of control, and is true and in more ways than one. On the one hand, they want to decelerate enough so that they can perch without falling off, but on the other hand, they don't want to decelerate too much because it pushes them too close to being out of control, and it also reduces their ability to recover and make adjustments because of misjudgments to begin with. And with that, we come to the end of this podcast. If you liked it, hit the like and subscribe buttons. And if you're working on a project where you need a high fidelity cast aerodynamic simulation, those are commissions that I take on. There's a link in the description with examples of what I deliver. And if you want to learn more about why some birds are more agile than others, we've touched on earlier how hummingbirds are definitely more agile than condors, check out this podcast here. Peace out, amigos.